would appear to be what Bolton World was sort of alluding to around the first disclosure. This is brand new reporting in the New York Times about the Bolton book. And I'll just read the beginning of it because this is germane to the vote these senators are about to take. And I hope they stop and listen and stop and read this. Times reporting, quote, more than 2 months before he asked Ukraine's president to investigate his political opponents, President Trump directed John Bolton, his national security advisor, to help with his pressure campaign to extract damaging information on Democrats from Ukrainian officials. It's according to that unpublished manuscript by Mr. Bolton. Mr. Trump gave the instruction, Mr. Bolton writes, during an Oval Office conversation in early May. That included the acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, the president's personal lawyer, Rudolph Giuliani, and the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, who's now leading the president's impeachment defense. The significance of this can't be understated. The pressure campaign for which Donald Trump was impeached began in May. It began in May, and Bolton seems to implicate all of the players. And I liken that first Bolton leak, if you will, reported by the Times to that scene where Tom Cruise runs into the firm and realizes that the whole firm was corrupt. This is the feeling captured by these leaks from the Bolton manuscript, that what Bolton writes is that in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, Mick Mulvaney, Rudy Giuliani, and Pat Cipollone, who is the acting defense counsel for Donald Trump, who, if he's brought along Republicans, if he's shamed Republicans, he's the one who was part of the illegal scheme.
Mr. Trump told Mr. Bolton to call Zelensky, who had recently won election as president of Ukraine, to ensure Zelensky would meet with, wait for it, Rudy Giuliani, who was planning a trip to Ukraine to discuss the investigations that the president sought. This is up against it on timing.
Well, let me just read the next line. Mr. Bolton never made the call. So Donald Trump called in the code red. Donald Trump told his national security advisor, not his national security advisor, the country's national security advisor, to call Zelensky and tell him to do a deal with Rudy. Bolton refused. I mean, when Bolton, and the fact that Bolton hung on, this happened in May. What he writes about in his Ukraine chapter took place in May. Bolton hung on until September 11th, which is the day that the aid was released. So Bolton's demise likely began in May when he refused to do this. In May, Joe Biden, correct me if I'm wrong, was #1 in the polls. Donald Trump remains haunted at night by the prospect of Joe Biden taking some of his winning coalition from him. He knows he can't win if 6 or more stay home. So the idea that the pressure campaign began in May has never been corroborated, has never been put out there by a firsthand witness. And I'm telling you, this makes that vote against witnesses political suicide. I hope they take it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.